Matt, appreciate you joining me and just spending, half hour, 45 minutes of your time just talking about real estate and how attorneys are involved or not involved in the transaction. And so you are someone that I'm in a couple very active Facebook groups, and you seem to be one that is unlike most attorneys and really gives valuable information on the front end, kind of tries to educate as opposed to, hey, bill me for or schedule time only. That's the only time I'll talk to you. So that's something that's one of the reasons I reached out to you and just said, hey, like, let's get Matt on and let's talk about how attorneys are involved in real estate. So I'll kind of hand that off to you. Tell us a little bit about, where you're involved in the world of real estate and attorney work, and your background.
Sure. Well, I'll give you a little hint about myself by telling you what my business name is called. My business is Iowa Business Lawyer, because I do focus primarily on the needs of small businesses. And my dream is to help people not need to go to court or to really need extensive and expensive legal services. A lot of people will say, the surgeons are, the best doctors. But honestly, if your general practice doctor can keep you out of the operating room, I'd say your general practice doctor should get a pat on the back. And that's kind of my thing too. I like to help people make decisions when it's easy to make corrections and improve things so that you don't get into trouble. And I do work with all kinds of people, not just small businesses. For example, I've worked with homeowners who hired a contractor who bailed on them, and they said, "What do I do?" So I do work with a wide variety of people with an emphasis on small and community businesses.
It's fun that you pull that into that direction, because I have ran a couple different businesses, and the niche thing is really scary for business owners to do, because you're like, I want to do everything. When in reality, if you're just really good at one thing, there's usually enough of that one thing that will support you, your family, and all your dreams. So I applaud you for, being that real estate or the business attorney, but knowing your limitations. So cool.
Well, and not only that, but I wake up every day excited to go to work. I get to help businesses today. I especially love young entrepreneurs, or I had a couple young real estate investors in my office the other day, and we were walking through how to set up their business to achieve their goals. And, I got to just kind of coach them through the basics. That is what I live for. So yeah, I love it.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you just owning that and living with that. So that's fun. So I'm gonna, like I said at the beginning, I'm going to break this down into residential home ownership world. So when someone's buying a house or selling a house, where in your mind do or don't attorneys get involved? Because, and I'm gonna take a step back, every state does this a little bit differently. And Iowa has one way to do it. Nebraska has a way. I know Illinois has a whole different way. So like, in your mind, and don't worry about stepping on my agent toes, I'm more than happy to understand where everyone belongs in this world. So like, where does an attorney kind of fit in that process?
Sure. And you don't have to worry about me stepping on your toes, in fact, because sometimes people come to me and they say, I don't want to pay the realtor commission. I just want to do this the cheap way, maybe do it by myself. Can I hire you? And I actually strongly encourage people to use a realtor, because then they've got somebody who can help them through every stage of the process. So the people who are home buyers or home sellers probably should deal with a realtor in most cases. There are lawyers involved. So there are lawyers who are going behind the scenes that the buyer and the seller usually don't meet, studying the legal documents behind the scene to make sure that everything is done right. When you buy a house in Iowa, you get this thick packet of paper called an abstract that is actually very much a history of everything that's happened to the house and the land that it's sitting on since Iowa became a state back in the 1850s or 60s. And they're kind of fun to read, especially if you look at some of these 100-year-old houses, because, it's like a novel. It's fun. Well, I don't know. Maybe I'm a law geek.
It tells a really cool story. I listed a property with a guy who did the research on who owned the house before he bought it. And it was like some slimy salesman back in, early days. And he like ran circuses, and he told a whole story around it because he loved that. He researched that abstract. So yeah, I get it.
The reason why you need us involved in the sale is because we want to make sure that the buyer is getting clean title. Because what would happen is, like, for example, if there's a lawsuit against a person selling a house and that lawsuit gets attached to the deed or the property of the house, the buyer might get stuck having to pay that. So you need a lawyer looking at this history to make sure that the title is free and clear. And then likewise too, it used to be that there was a lot of snake oil salespeople handling deeds, and they might sell the same house to two people. And this has kind of gone away now with our modern systems. But then, whoever recorded the deed first might be the winner, or whoever recorded it last might be the winner. And anyways, in either case, there was usually a loser, and you wouldn't want to be that person. And so the lawyers protect you. Even though technology has made that process a lot easier, you still need a lawyer involved in writing the deeds. And sometimes people do come to us with only a deed problem. So for example, if one family member is going to basically give up their interest in the property to someone else, they might do a quit claim deed. And you might come to me directly rather than a realtor for that. And I might talk you out of it, or I might say this is the right way to go. And we'll give the reasoning for it. But that's why most consumer focused homeowners would need a lawyer for this. But usually they're going to want the realtor be the one talking to the lawyer and not coming to the lawyer directly. I think that the services you provide are very valuable. And yeah, I know you're expensive. That 6% or 7% can be a tough pill to swallow. But the marketing that you do, the experience that you have, making sure that all the disclosures are filed properly, that people make smart decisions, connecting you with like an inspector and such, you bring all of that knowledge and experience. So I'd say, I want them to talk to you.
No, I appreciate that. I get it. I mean, even before I was as a real estate agent, I did property transactions without real estate agents and whatnot. And one of the things I noticed, and as I became an agent and have done the same thing, is that the 3% that you pay, it's not always, you can't always like measure apples to apples. I say 3% because the buying agent gets 3, the selling agent gets 3. So that's why. But you can't measure apples to apples. But if I'm an agent and I know real estate really well, I would love to negotiate against someone who is not a seasoned professional or an agent, right?
That's right.
Because like I know the tips, the tricks, the contracts better than any homeowner for sale by owner. Now, like I'm working for my clients. So if I'm trying to get them the best deal on the property that they want to buy, then I'm going to negotiate hard according to that buyer. So like,
but not only that, but if you are doing a for sale by owner, buyers know, oh, well, they're not paying a commission. And so they're going to try hard to talk you down. And yeah, I don't think that it's worth it. I think that just get a realtor involved.
Yep.
Now, you did ask me a question. When should they get me involved? And pros, people who do a lot of transactions, can sometimes get by without a realtor involved. And so I do work with professional real estate buyers and sellers to speed up the process. Oftentimes, they're not doing a traditional bank loan. Maybe they've got a few $100,000 sitting around and they want speed. And so, we can close in 3 or 4 days sometimes in those situations. They will come right to me. But even then, sometimes they're still going to have you involved because you have the MLS system for them.
Yeah, that's definitely a different kind of buyer. So residential buyers, what's one thing I want to talk about is you buy the property, and this might be more tax law, but I think you'll have an opinion on it. When you put a property in your personal name, what are is there a reason to put it into an estate or a trust or an LLC to protect that asset for yourself if you're just going to live in it?
Sure. Well, asset protection is a big deal. Usually when people are going to look into some kind of estate planning tool like a trust, they're usually helping speed up or simplify the process of that property being handed down to an heir. The exception would be sometimes people know, okay, you know what, I don't want this to be impacted by, nursing home expenses, for example. And so there are tools that we can use to help people. I don't know. I don't like hiding assets. That I know some people just think, that's the best thing. How can I avoid this by hiding my assets?
Well, to me, it's like the government gives you rules, right? If you do X, Y, and Z, you're following those rules as per they asked. So it is a way to take advantage of whatever the government decided to allow, right?
Sure.
So
yep.
So I listened to Tom Wheelwright is a tax expert, like big guy, Robert Kiyosaki guy, and he always says, if you change your facts, you can change your tax. Right. And so if you know the rules, the IRS is a book full of loopholes. Like loopholes is like a bad thing to say, but it's direction on what the government, politicians, whatever, wants you to do in whatever tax code says. So if you follow the tax code and you get around paying all your taxes, You just follow the directions.
So yes,
My opinion.
I would say that there is definitely some truth to that. I will put a differentiation, and I did use a special word, and that is hiding assets. So I'm not a big fan of hiding assets. I am a big fan of protecting assets.
Yeah.
And so usually, like for example, here's a situation that's easy to get around to everyone to get on board with, and that is the idea of this Miller Trust. And so, for example, let's say that you have a house that you live in, and you've had it paid off for 25 years, you've lived there for 50 years, and it's not worth a lot, maybe $100,000, and now it's time to go into a nursing home. And the money that comes out of that is not going to be enough to support you, and you're going to need government assistance to get the support. But because you have this $100,000 asset, you can't qualify for government support, right? That's a tragic situation, because now a person basically is not going to be able to survive because they have too much money, but they don't have enough money to survive on.
Cash
And
flow.
so, yeah. Well, we can use a Miller Trust. So we're not hiding the assets. What we're doing is we're partitioning them off so that the person will qualify for some government assistance. And then these assets will feed into the system as kind of a trickle and still allow them to qualify. So that's a really high level overview. The same also is true with revocable trust or a living trust. Is sometimes we put these assets in there so that distributions to heirs can be a lot easier. And for example, let's just use an example of a life insurance policy. A lot of us have them. A lot of us understand them. If you die and your spouse is the beneficiary of your life insurance policy, that doesn't go through your will. You don't have to have a court decide what's going to happen. When you die a week or two or whatever later, your wife's going to get a check for whatever the value of the insurance policy is. It's that simple. And the same is true when a trust works the way it's supposed to. If you don't have a trust, you just have a will, then your assets get managed by the court under the supervision of someone that you appoint, and then they get distributed according to your wishes and your will. But a court oversees that whole process, and it takes, on the low side, 6 months for, we call that process the probate process. It takes on the low side 6 months for that to happen. Whereas if you use a trust, then this distribution can happen in days. It doesn't have to be very, very long at all. And it skips the court process. It's really, really nice. So that's one of the reasons why I like trusts, and we'll talk to people about the trusts, not so much to hide it, but just to simplify life, make life easier, make life more enjoyable for you and your heirs, and to give peace of mind.
Yep. Helps you sleep at night.
It does. Yeah, it does. And then, of course, if you have young children, which I'm sure that you're probably dealing with a lot of people who are maybe buying their first house, or maybe their first house with kids, these trusts can also help them too, so that if there's a tragedy and the spouse or the parents can't take care for the kids for some reason, then the trust will appoint someone to watch them, distribute the money to them at a measured basis. You wouldn't want a 9-year-old suddenly having $500,000 in cash, right? They would be preyed upon by unscrupulous people.
Blank Check. You ever seen that movie?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Well, I was thinking of, you remember Different Strokes, that TV show from like the 80s? And the child actor, he made all this money, and then when he got to be an adult, it was gone because his parents spent it. Right. And, that was a tragic situation. But, a living trust like this can be used to distribute these assets out in the way that the parents want. So
what would be the difference between a trust and a will in that situation? It sounded, when you're talking through that, it sounded a lot like a will.
Sure. Well, we usually have both. So what we'll do is we'll move the title. The trust is kind of like a person, and the law does kind of look at the trust as a person. So your assets become owned by this entity, this trust. And then anything that's not owned by the trust, the will controls how it's handled. But the things that are owned by the trust, there's a contract that goes with it. And then that trust contract distributes assets according to the trust's requirements. I'm just going to say a couple of things that I think are big problems. Yeah. One is, we see anytime there is a rush in remodeling and things like that, we see a problem with unscrupulous contractors.
Yes.
And this is a big problem that affects homeowners. And especially, for example, if you buy a house and it needs a little work, then you might have budgeted some money to put towards a deck or siding or whatever. But there's not a lot, but those unscrupulous people do tend to get a lot of attention. And it is so sad. Iowa's laws are not strong enough to protect contractors, protect homeowners from contractors.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Yeah. And it's not because the laws protect contractors. It's because it's a very difficult situation. It really is tricky, because 99% of the transactions are perfect, right? We don't want those processes to change. We just want to build in some protections for those 1% that are rotten. And because the law is a little bit on the weak side right now, I do suggest a couple things. A, whatever you guys agree, have a contract, get it in writing. A contractor without a contract is what? Not a contractor, right? Because there's no contract.
I'm gonna take a quick step back. So we're talking about a homeowner or like buyer seller. So when you own the home,
Yep.
you hired a contractor, or you're in the process of hiring a contractor. That's where we're at.
Yep.
Perfect.
Good. Thanks for clarifying that. That's our roadmap. And you want to know, can I trust this person? Is this person going to take care of me and my interests? Are they going to take the money and run? And so usually what I say is A, have a contract. B, make sure that they are a licensed contractor with the state of Iowa. So you can go to contractor.iowa.gov and you can look them up and see if they're in there. If they are an in-state contractor, it'll have details about them. If they are an out-of-state contractor, then the government requires them to have a bond, which is a kind of insurance that protects the customer in that situation if the contractor runs away. And if the contractor is just evil, an evil person, without those two things, the government is going to struggle to help you, because all they have to do is, provide a little materials or show up to the job site and swing a hammer a couple times. And now 3 of the 4 ways that the government can go after them has been eliminated. And I hope that these unscrupulous contractors are not watching the video because I don't want them to know how challenging it is. But the Iowa Attorney General is the course of action. And guess what? They're busy. The Iowa Attorney General Consumer Protection Division has got a lot on their plate.
Yeah. So homeowners, your course of action there. So someone shows up, you give them $5,000 to remodel or build the deck, and they say, "Yep, we'll be back tomorrow," and they just don't show up. But you know where they live, you know everything about them. Like what are the checkpoints? You want to check to see if they're licensed.
Yes, on the contractor website.
Right. And so if they are, then you can go after them easier. Is that correct?
You do have a little bit more power there, but really the CD ones typically skip that step. And so if they're on there, that's actually a good sign. It's not a guarantee, but it is a good sign that they jump through the hoops that the state put up to get on there.
Okay. Licensed insured would be another one, I'm guessing.
Yep. Insurance is a big deal. You want to make sure they're covered because that actually protects the homeowner from the contractor putting a claim against the homeowner. So, they go up on your roof, they fall off. Can they come after you? If they're insured, you really don't have to worry about that.
Yep. And then having a contract.
In writing. Now, here's why I mentioned that specifically, because, I was thinking about the home buying process, and I have seen some people lie on the disclosure statements and they say, oh yeah, we've never had flooding in the basement. And then they find out, well, guess what? The basement's flooded a lot. And the way to protect against that is to have a good inspection done, which I'm hoping you're recommending to your customers. And or the people you represent. A home inspection is a very, very powerful tool. And then that leads oftentimes to this process of bringing on a contractor. They boarded up this area of the wall. If you look behind it, there's a big crack there, or something. Especially on older houses. But guess what? Even new houses, they could be 6 years old or whatever and still have defects that a good inspector would find.
Yeah, most definitely.
How about a question for you? Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, you bet.
How often do you suggest or see issues with surveys?
I've never had one question. Not of the 70 plus we've done. Besides maybe my personal house. So we bought an acreage and the previous owner had to survey it off because I believe they needed to sell a portion of the land with the property.
Oh yeah.
For whatever reason. And so it was a weird survey, but honestly, none. Tell me why you ask.
Well, I'm not used to having surveys done either, but I did bump into a person where the agent suggested to the buyer to have a survey done, but they did it after closing for some reason. And then they found out that the fence of the neighbor was on their property. And it caused a lot of strife amongst the neighbors. And, the new buyer was upset over this because somebody said, you need to make sure this is handled. And they were a new homeowner, right? First time, I think, or, definitely not very experienced. And And then the neighbors who had been there for years, and loved their fence and took pride in their yard, it was a mess. And honestly, I just wonder if the best advice would have been, don't get a survey.
Yeah, I mean, especially in those older neighborhoods around Des Moines. When you first said that, I straight thought new development, right?
Well, this was a new development, by the way.
It was new development. Yeah. Okay, because those seem more cookie cutter.
Mm-hmm.
I could be wrong, but they seem more cookie cutter. Most of them have fences. Most of them have pretty solid I say most, 50%. Where your older Des Moines areas, they're very, by the big oak tree is where my land ends, right? Like or a big tree grew right in the middle of the survey, the land, right? So I don't know. I've not had that issue or question, except if maybe shared driveways or encumbrances, that type of thing. But
well, encumbrances are something that a lawyer will bring to buyers' attention when they do that search on the abstract. Okay. That is actually another thing to mention. They're quite common. If you've got power lines going down the back of the property lines, then the power company is going to have permission to go back there and fix them. And that can be a shock, if you look out your back window and there's a alignment in your backyard.
Right. And then like agriculture or acreages type stuff where, one neighbor needs to get back to a property that they own. And I believe Iowa law is they have access to that of some capacity somewhere. You can't basically section off an area and sell something and then leave someone kind of stranded in the middle of that land. So, but I haven't directly dealt with that.
Yeah, you definitely get into esoteric, old-fashioned laws. My property law inspector said, if we see a property law that's less than 200 years old, we consider that a new law.
Wow.
Yeah, and so when the first laws that we studied in property law class dated back to like the 14 and 1500s. So property law is still pretty much the same 500-600 years ago.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Cool. This is going to be an off the wall question, but I think it has a lot to do with the future of like contracting and stuff. Are you familiar with the NFT blockchain technology, like where I see of some capacity in the future, the abstracting title work being more open and less hands-on?
Sure.
Are you familiar with that world at all?
So before I was a lawyer, I was a software developer. I did a computer programming. I worked on self-driving vehicles and So I'm pretty familiar with the technology. I definitely help people in the crypto area, NFTs. I do understand the smart contract stuff. And I will say that just going back to what I just talked about, property law is very slow to change.
Yeah.
And so the blockchain technology has the capability to make one problem a lot simpler with property law. And that is, we spend a huge amount of resources keeping good records of who owns property. Back earlier in the conversation, I mentioned that, there used to be problems with deeds. Whoever gets there first or whoever gets it last or whatever wins. And so, recording in the blockchain could make that problem a lot easier. And I do see some startups who are working on this problem. Here's the issue. So I'm a little skeptical that this is going to change anything soon. Every state and every county in every state uses a different system for recording. It is a hyper local system. And so these companies who want to deal with these recording systems are going to have to convince, I don't know, I mean, there's 99 counties in Iowa alone, and I don't know how many there are in the country.
Yeah,
it's not a small job to change that system.
No, and I think as you say that, what's going through my mind is they're just going to go to the biggest ones first. So by the time, this one good thing about living in the Midwest, by the time it gets to us, it's usually vetted out really well.
That's true. There are some companies who focus on smaller markets first because the risk of problems is lower. So we'll see, Des Moines County, Iowa, or something like that be on the first list.
Interesting. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Cool. I appreciate throwing that curveball. I just see it disrupting many industries, and I always like to talk about how it could, or thoughts around it. But I would agree. We all think things are going to move much faster than they ever do.
That's right.
In general. So
I think after years of working with people using technology, I've always been surprised at how slow people are to change. We think we are so much different now than we were. And, you go back and read books from 100 years ago, and people were still thinking about the same problems that we're thinking about today. The technology is different, but the problems are the same. So we will see.
Yes, very true. So we'll wrap this up. I appreciate your time. Tell anyone listening to this, watching this, where and how would be the best way to do business with you, and or what exactly are you looking for in an ideal client?
Sure. My ideal client is someone who is concerned about business risk. And so if that describes you, like I want to know, how does this LLC help me avoid problems, or what do I do because I have this situation and I want to avoid it getting worse or whatever. Risk management, risk understanding is what I love to do. And so if that sounds like you and we're talking about business, that's good. You can find me on the web at iowabusinesslawyer.com. So I try to make it real easy. And that way, if people ask me, do you do divorces? I can say iowabusinesslawyer.com, because no, I don't do divorces. And you can go right on there and you can see my calendar and you can schedule time with me, or, whatever. I do a lot of meetings with Zoom or on the phone. Maybe 20% of my clients come meet me in the office, but I'm open late on Mondays. So if someone's got a day job and they need to meet, we can meet Monday evenings at 6:30 if you want to. So I try to make it real easy for busy people to connect with me.
Cool. Yeah. And we'll have your links and information below in the podcast and in the YouTube channel. So we'll have links direct, and I'll go straight to your either calendar or your website. What about socials? Do you do anything on any of the socials? I know attorneys and tax people, they seem to be really gun shy on that type stuff. So where are you at on that?
Well, right now I do get a lot of my business through Facebook. And so I do stay active on Facebook, and I try to stay involved in some of the real estate and local communities on Facebook. I want to be involved in some of these social networks. You say you're on TikTok. I have to figure out the right kinds of content that would be helpful there, and I haven't yet. That's one of my goals for one day. So you can find me on Facebook, and it is Iowa Business Lawyer on Facebook as well.
Yeah, and that's where I learned about you. And again, you were just providing an immense amount of just education about tenant landlord rules in Des Moines. And so, yeah, I would encourage anyone to go out there and engage. So I appreciate it. Any last words?
No, thanks for meeting with me. And I look forward to seeing it published. And also now I'll check out some of the other content. I want to see what other kinds of cool people you're meeting with.
Yeah. So yeah, just a perspective on that. So I do real estate coaching, right? And one of the things that he talked about is just like, how do you become and provide that valuable educational entertainment to your clients? And I consume a lot of edutainment, right? So the TikTok and YouTube, I consume a lot of that. And I'm like, I know enough smart people that I could have a conversation with, learn for my profession. And then also anyone that's doing business with me would love to hear that content too. And then obviously promote your business too. So kind of a win, kind of a triple threat win, in my opinion.
I agree.
I don't know. So we'll see how it goes, but I will keep you posted.
Fun. Thanks.
Cool. Appreciate it, Matt. Yeah. Thank you. Have a good one.
Yep. You too. Bye-bye.